Hello everyone. In this video on the theory of markedness, we will be working and knowing few earlier works on this theory and their assumptions, the basic assumptions. Here is an introduction again. Most of these points have already been taught and discussed in the previous two videos, but, but let's just recapitulate once more. The concept of markedness in linguistics came to prominence in the 20th century, as we have already introduced in the previous talks, and continues to play a central role in this discipline called phonology. A number of important questions arise about the markedness in phonological theory. The basic ones are: what is markedness? What are its diagnostics? What role does it play in phonological system, if there is any? Can markedness be categorized universally in terms of substance, or is it language particular? Or are there both universal and language specific aspects to the theory? The term markedness is used in phonology to capture the central observation that not all elements in a phonological system are of equal status. So there is a asymmetry which exists between elements of a phonological system. Elements means they can be sound segments, syllable structure, or prosodic features. The term markedness was first introduced by Trubetskoy in 1939, and then his work was republished or translated into English in 1969 to refer to relations between elements of a phonological class. For example, place of articulation, phonation type of a language on a language particular basis. So it refers, basically the term markedness refers to relations between elements of a phonological class, and these elements are not of equal status. That is a central assumption of the theory of markedness. Let's have a quick look at the earlier works of this theory. For views on featural markedness that relates to contrast, you can see Lombardy's 2002 and De Lacy's 2002 and 2006. These three works actually gives us views on featural markedness. Feature means those distinctive features that we are already aware of. Sounds are actually built up of distinctive features, and these marked unmarked dichotomy are also drawn from some other sources, like we already discussed Jakobson's works and Trubetskoy's books, etc. Even current linguistic dictionaries like Trask 1996 and Christel's 2003. These are Jakobson's and Trubetskoy's. And then you have dictionaries like R.L. Trask's A Dictionary of Phonetics and Phonology, then David Christel's 2003, A Dictionary of Linguistics and Phonetics, then even encyclopedia articles like Mary Louise Keene's Markedness and Overview. This was published in the encyclopedia called International Encyclopedia of Linguistics, edited by William Bright and published in 1992. So all these works actually talk more and more about this theory called markedness, and they have posited and situated the theory in a very beautiful, way. All these works are of very huge importance. The marked unmarked dichotomy are also drawn from other sources. For example, textbooks like Michael Kanstowicz, 1994, Yigi Roca, 1994 again, Andrew Spencer, 1996, Rene Kager, 1999. So all these all these are actually textbooks, but they have mentioned markedness theory as one of the discipline of phonological terms. Then there are works on phonological theory in proper, not textbooks. These are works on phonological theory itself. And here is a list of works. Joseph Greenberg's 1966, Anderson's 1985, John Harris 1994, Diana Arcangeli and Douglas Pulling-Blank's 1994, and Juliet Blevin's 2004. So you can see the range of time frame starting from Greenberg's 1966 to Blevin's 2004. So it's a huge range of time frame which in which the phonological theory have developed enormously, but still they have rooted certain aspects of markedness theory. So all of them have accounted for this theory and very brilliantly posited this kind of dichotomy. Some other sources also includes writings on the theory of markedness exclusively. So there is a list. You can see Edwin Battistella's 1990 work. It's a book. K.P. Mohanon's 1991. For a reference, I would say that K.P. Mohanon is the one who, together with Paul Kipersky, have developed lexical phonology as a theory. So anyway, so Donker's Theriads' 1985 chapter in John Goldsmith's edited volume called The Handbook of Phonological Theory. Then Karen Rice's 1999, Linda Lombardi's 2002, Paul D. Lacey 2006. So again, there is a time frame of almost 16 years where the writings on theory of markedness has gained enormous famous, I mean fame during that period. Starting that was the very productive age of the theory of markedness when people have written exclusively on this theory. So these are some examples of the earlier works on this theory. So let's have a look at the two criteria to which markedness actually relies on. And these two criteria are how to define the opposition between marked and unmarked. And there are certain terms that are placed into two groups with non-phonological criteria and phonological criteria. So these are two different criteria on the basis of which marked unmarked distinction is placed. So we should have a detailed account of this, and here is the non-phonological criteria. There are 18 in total, and this first slide number 8 gives us a count of what is the non-phonological criteria to distinguish between marked elements and the unmarked element of a particular phonological class. So what is marked and what is unmarked? Marked structures are those which are less natural, more complex, more specific, less common, unexpected, not basic, less stable. So marked are those which actually are basically they are not very basic. That is the first thumb rule. Less natural, that means it doesn't come naturally. More complex, that means the structure, it is structurally more complex than the other form. More specific, that means it's more it requires more specific distinction. It's less common, that means as I said it's not basic, so it's less common. It's unexpected, so because it's less natural, it's unexpected. Then it's not basic is another criteria. Then it's less stable. On the other hand, the unmarked forms are more natural, less complex, more general, more common, expected, basic, more stable. So this is a very fine line distinction between the marked and unmarked categories, because when a marked structure is less, and for the same criteria, unmarked structure is more. When this has more, this has less, and so on. So there is a binary opposition between these two uh, concepts. Marked thing is more complex and less basic. On the other hand, unmarked structures are less complex, but they are basic. Here we go for a clearer understanding. What is marked? So for this kind of two sounds like pa and pa, pa is more basic because it appears in more of the most languages. It's basic because it's more general. It's basic because it's less complex. It's basic because it's more natural, expected, etc. etc. On the other hand, if you compare the same sound with pa, it's less natural, more complex. Why more complex? Because it has got an additional feature that is spread glottis, etc. etc. So these two sounds have a markedness, dichotomy or distinctiveness between themselves. If you compare these two sounds, you will find that pa is more basic and fa is less basic. Okay. Then let's compare these two vowels. E, that is a simple, very simple sound. E. Most of the languages have this sound. On the other hand, the central vowel E, of course, not many languages that you know possess this sound. So, which one is among these two vowels? Which one do you think is more basic? And if whatever is basic, we will account that for the unmarked variation. So between these two vowels, we find that more languages have E rather than E. Okay, so E is unmarked and E is marked. Why? Because this is not basic, less stable, unexpected, less common, more specific, more complex, and less natural. So these are the kinds of markedness distinction between sounds. Okay. Then here is a list of another set of 7 features starting from marked structures appear in few grammars, whereas unmarked features or forms appear in more grammars. Marked structures or forms are later in acquisition, whereas unmarked are earlier in acquisition. So if we take into account the previous examples, then also these statements hold true, because per, which is an unmarked sound, appear in more grammars, in more languages, and it is earlier in acquisition. So if you imagine a child is learning or acquiring a language, do you think he or she will adopt or learn per first or per first? Definitely he will adopt or learn per first. So it is earlier in acquisition, and it has late loss in language deficit. So it's more basic. That's why when there is a language deficit kind of a situation, you will learn about language deficit in your psycholinguistics paper. If there is a language loss, some kind of internal injury or some kind of age related factors affect a person, and there is a language loss, then also he or she will lose the pronunciation or lose the remembrance or that vocabulary consisting pa, not pa. Pa will go later. Then implied by mark structure, uh, the presence of unmarked structures are implied by the mark. If there is a pa, then there should be a pa, but not the other way around. So if there is a pa, does not imply that there should be a pa. So that is the another interesting fact of marked unmarked features. harder to articulate marked structure, but unmarked are easier to articulate. Taking again that example, E, the simple E vowel, high front vowel, E is easier to articulate. On the other hand, E, which is a central vowel, is hard to articulate. Not everybody would be able to articulate it unless and until the sound appears in the native grammar, native language of the person. You know, the pronunciation of E is little, hard than E. Then perceptually less salient. So if a person says pa, it goes unnoticed, perceptually less salient. If a person says pa or e, then they are perceptually, so the hearer picks up that more easily or more distinctively. Okay. And unmarked sounds also have larger phonetic space, and this relates to the acoustic aspect of the sound. So it has larger. If you store somewhere, then storing pa will require larger space than storing pa. So that's an acoustic or waveform related uh, this thing, aspect to marked unmarked distinction. Let's have a look at these two examples. Lateral fricative like lia, which is a very marked kind of a sound. Why? Because it's not a very basic sound. It does not appear in more grammars. And if a language has both, lateral lia and a plain la like this, and what do you think? Which sound a child of that language, a native speaker of that language will acquire first? Which sound it will acquire first? The plain lateral la will be acquired first, isn't it? And la, on the other hand, will come to the person even during acquisition late. Okay, and similarly, all other aspects are evaluated. Let's also have a look at this particular example where there is a voiceless nasal with a single dot underneath the ma sound, you can see here, and the nasal, the plain nasal ma. So as you know, nasals are by default sonorants, so they are naturally voiced. So voicing for sonorants is the unmarked feature. Okay, so if a nasal is voiced, then it's taken for granted, so it should be voiced. It's like that. But a voiceless nasal, on the other hand, this is a marked form of a nasal because it's not basic. Nasals are meant to be voiced. So if there is a nasal which is voiceless, that means it's not a basic sound or a structure. Okay. So here are the criteria list. So you should remember all of them. Okay. So coming to the phonological criteria, marked structures are subject to neutralization. We will learn about neutralization later, but you should remember this particular fact that marked structures are subject to neutralization. On the other hand, unmarked structures are a result of neutralization. Marked structures are unlikely to be epenthetic, whereas unmarked are likely to be epenthetic. Epenthetic means to be inserted. Okay, it's an adjective. Marked structures are trigger of assimilation, whereas unmarked structures are target of assimilation. Marked structures remain in coalescence, whereas unmarked structures are lost in coalescence. Marked structures are retained in deletion, but unmarked structures are lost in deletion. So these five are the phonological criteria of marked unmarked forms, which one by one we will be unfolding when we will be doing the exact topic that, for example, neutralization, appendices, assimilation, coalescence, deletion, some of them you are already aware of, but as and when we proceed, we will have detailed accounts of the same. So then things will be more clearer to you. For the time being, you just remember these distinctions. Okay. Thank you.